everyone, welcome back to Coachy TV. In this video, we're going to talk about a topic that, I would say in some cases you might consider controversial, in some cases might be considered almost like a fad or a trend or something like that, and really I think should be considered as something that's just really good all-around training schemes with the science and everything that goes along with it, and that's barefoot running for the specific strength that it gives to your distance runners. A lot of things you hear, it's the only way to go, or minimalist shoes, or things like that. There's a lot of things out there that I think are just sort of unsubstantiated, but there's also a lot of really good science that's gone into this in terms of not just how to do it correctly, but why does it really help? Because we can't figure out why something helps if we really can't say that if it does help and why it helps, then we really shouldn't be doing any of that, no matter what the training is. So we're going to look at what specific strength gains do these types of workouts, barefoot runs, create, and how can we best use barefoot runs throughout the season, because there is just like anything else, sort of a standard progression that you should get to, a starting point and then building up. So pictures here are two different barefoot workouts that we do, both the Wharton Boys and Growth Distance Group during last track season. Two different barefoot workouts. The first one that we'll talk about that you can do at the beginning of the season and then kind of throughout. Right here, and then progressing to a little bit more intense type of workouts that you see here on the right-hand side, and we'll talk you through both of those. I am Kyle Giacono, the head boys cross country and track coach at Wharton High School in Tampa, Florida, and I have been for the last 7 years. If you'd like a closer look at some of my credentials, they are on the screen. So sort of the idea here is the strength gains that come from barefoot runs. And so I just want to sort of briefly summarize some of the pros and cons of strength training overall with a distance runner. So basically what we want are to improve strength and muscles key to maintaining correct posture and mechanics, reduce potential injury rate, think what's best posture and mechanics and how we can enhance this. We also want to create muscle elasticity in a sport-specific way to take advantage of free energy. Both of those first two things are not necessarily all that critical in terms of barefoot runs, except for we can reduce some injury rate potentially with some of this stuff. But this is really what we're looking at here. We want to increase force production from muscles that improve performance in the cross-country 5K. Basically, how do we make the race seem easier at race pace, okay? This is where barefoot runs really come into play. Like I said, there's some idea of it being from plyometric or elastic type energy, comes where the contact starts, and also correct posture and things like that can happen. Not necessarily posture, but more foot placement, which is kind of related to posture to help reduce injury rate. But this is the big thing here with running without shoes on, is that increased force production, the push off that comes from running without your shoes. And just kind of think about it. If you are in shoes when you're walking, your foot is just kind of there, essentially. It's not really going through the full range of motion. If you were to then remove your shoes and you were to actually walk or whatever, you get a lot more push off, or toe off is probably a better way of thinking about it. And that's part of the strength that we really want to sort of enhance with this type of training. What we don't want, briefly recap, and I did a video that talked just about strength gains in general. I'll put that in the description down below. We don't want to overtrain muscles to the point where posture mechanics suffer. We don't train things just to train them. And so this is an idea of, we're not just training these specific foot muscles just to train them. We're training them because of the specific gains that we get from things like the cross-country 5K. We don't want to add unneeded muscle weight, which is called hypertrophy, from building muscles that cause increased weight that the runner has to carry throughout, especially these distance races. That's obviously not going to be the case with foot strength. And enhancing muscles that don't contribute or improve performance in the cross-country 5K, right? If you improve muscles that don't improve performance, then all you're really doing is working something that is going to use oxygen that we need to go to the working muscles, the ones that are really important to the cross-country 5K. Well, obviously, every time you push off, you're going to be, that's a very specific muscle then for distance races, especially over, the longer the distance. So this is something that is really going to promote direct improvement in the cross-country 5K. So we don't have to worry about developing a muscle that's just going to consume oxygen. We're developing a muscle that is going to consume oxygen, these muscles, but it's going to directly lead to performance in the cross-country 5K. So that's how this all sort of plays out with this type of specific strength training.
So just to further explain this idea of the importance of overall foot strength when we're dealing with specific strength in a distant athlete, if done right, barefoot running can improve overall foot strength. It makes perfect sense when we talk about just thinking about the mechanics of what happens when somebody is just moving without shoes. This specific strength directly relates to improvements in distance running. Okay, the idea of, like we said, that push off or toe off. That strength allows for more power. We talk about making the race try to seem easier at race pace, so that's a direct link. And it's also going to improve economy. This is something we're going to talk about a little bit later on when we deal with a study that's really looked at this. But the idea being is you're using less energy based on the mechanics that typically come with somebody who, basically what's called the barefoot running sort of mechanic. It doesn't mean that you have to run barefoot to develop this, but if you're somebody that maybe naturally heel strikes, which is the opposite of barefoot running mechanics, this can help develop that so you can have some improved economy as well as that push-off strength. There are two main ways, and just to briefly back up here, this is the idea of the foot strength that comes with it, the economy and the strength that comes with improved foot strength. There's other reasons that we'll talk about why you would want to do this, basically reduction of potential injury rate, but right now we're just dealing with the strength aspect of it, and we'll get to that other aspect when we get a little bit further into this. So there are two main ways to develop this foot strength correctly, okay? The first one is never wear shoes at any point in the day. And that is absolutely not practical for, I would say, most of the world at this point. Obviously, that would develop a great deal of foot strength, but you could also have potential injuries, stepping on things, and it's just, in most parts of the world, it's expected that you're going to, have shoes on when you're, in sort of the general out just kind of going out and about. So that's really not practical, but that's actually probably the most beneficial way of doing it. But the second way, which is really, like I said, the practical way of doing it, is to run barefoot during certain high-intensity workouts, okay? So not just running just to run, having sort of a systematic way of looking at it. And the first one of those is with plyometric drills like short in-place jumps, and I'll put a video in the description down below with this, done throughout the microcycle. And this is the macrocycle, the entire season, macrocycle. This is basically what I do as part of the warm-up for our alactic workouts, fly 30s. And there's other ways that you could do this too with plyometrics, with bounding, but that's how I've kind of come to do it for my situation, but I'll explain that a little bit more when we get further into this. Also, later on in the season, Special Endurance 2, done in the second half of the macrocycle, basically from specific prep, should say specific prep, not specific pre, and later. So this is much more high-intensity type work. I'll put a video in the description down below that talks about Special Endurance 2, but these are pretty high-intensity type things. So the idea being is if you just, walk around all the time, you're just going to develop the strength just because of, just having so much time doing it. But if you're not going to do that, which most of the world can't, these two more high-intensity, and plyometric drills aren't really necessarily high-intensity, but they are in respect of what they're doing to the foot muscles, and if you do them in this order, starting with the plyometric drills, in general prep, you should do this all the way throughout the year as part of your Fly 30 alactic type work, and then progressing the Special Endurance 2 once you've developed a little more foot strength. It's a safe way of doing it, and it's an effective way of doing it also. Running barefoot just to do it does not help. So please, please, please don't just every once in a while randomly do it as, a stride thing or as part of your cool down or your warm up. It really needs to be systematic, and here's the reason why. So warm ups or short cool downs, say on the infield of a track, which is kind of something that you see quite often. That can help you feel better about it. You might say, oh, I'm doing it, and make you feel better about it. But it's really not long enough or fast enough to make any strength gains. Again, the first option, the best option, is to never do it. So that's basically, never subjecting yourself to the, I don't want to say weakening aspect of wearing shoes, but it can weaken foot muscles if you're not using them because you're not, having to go through just the toe-off mechanic. And it's, but if you're not going to do something like that, you have to do something a little bit higher intensity to force those strength gains to happen because you're not doing it all the time, right? So just warm-ups and cool-downs, they're just not going to be long enough or fast enough to really get any strength gains. It just might make you feel better. If you incorporate some of this in addition to these other things, so let's say you do the plyometrics throughout the macrocycle and then you progress to Special Endurance 2, and you also do some of your warm-ups some additional barefoot striding during plyometrics, which I also do. Maybe also adding part of your cooldown or all of your cooldown. Really, it should be all of your cooldown if you're going to do it, because you don't want to stop in the middle of it if you're trying to get aerobic development. Also, it might help some. But it's not going to do it without some of these other aspects of doing this more high intensity work, if that makes sense. So the first way of doing it is through plyometrics or jumps type work. I'll put a video in the description down below of as I mentioned, the short plyometric drills that we do just in isolation, and I'll also put a video down in the description about how it can be incorporated as part of a warm-up if you want to see what it actually looks like. But basically this is the idea behind this is plyometrics creates elastic response with the stretch shortening cycle, which is going to start before you even hit the ground, but obviously, foot strength and things like that are going to be part of it because it's where you're contacting the ground, and that's where the energy is partially generated from. Rapid transition from eccentric to concentric muscle contractions, which the actual contact point, your foot itself, is going to have part of that. And it creates muscles that are stiffer upon impact. Again, it starts before you hit the ground, but the idea being is foot strength can enhance that, transfers free elastic energy to the next step. When we develop it, we can transfer 10 to 30% of energy free in any type of race or any type of workout also. Doing so without shoes does not reduce this elastic effect. So doing this is not going to hurt what you're trying to do with the plyometrics. So it's a good way of incorporating it, and you're getting a lot of contacts at sort of a higher intensity type way so that you can develop the elastic response to the stretch shortening cycle and work on foot strength at the same time in a very safe way throughout. Now, when I do this as part of my alactic routine, the warm-up for it. So we will do this at the track. So I've got a nice soft grass infield that we can do this at, which I know is a very safe way of doing some barefoot type work, which is an important aspect of this. So while you're working one type of specific strength, this elastic effect, you can work another by making this a barefoot workout. Again, specific strength. Distance runners don't have to be strong in a lot of areas, but the areas they have to be strong in have to be very strong because of how many contacts. So we're developing foot strength, we're developing elastic strength as you're focusing really on the alactic energy system on these days is when I would recommend it. Safe way to start working the first muscles for this greater push-off. Pair these with alactic fly 30s as an extension of their warm-up. As I mentioned, I'll put it in the video in the description down below. Activating the foot muscles that push off will also enhance the speed work that they're about to do. Alactic work is all about as fast as you can go. If you're going to get a little bit more of an enhanced push off, as well as just the proper mechanics of not heel striking, which we'll talk about later on, it's just going to enhance them, make them faster, make their alactic work even that much more effective. These workouts should start in general prep. We talked about this being in the macro cycle, and sometimes there'll be a little bit of a pushback of, you're working speed in the summertime with cross country or in the winter time with, your 3,200 meter, 1,600 meter, or 800 meter runners. It's like, absolutely. This is something that takes a long time to develop, and foot strength, we don't want to just not do it for most of the year and only do it when we get into specific prep. So we're doing this in a systematic way. Typically, I would say that a distance runner should get about maybe 20 to 25 alactic sessions a year. So that's about every other week if you really sort of look at it in an entire year between the two seasons. So you are going to be doing your fly 30s throughout general prep. So you might as well do this as a way of continuing the foot strength and setting up a little bit more intense work later on. And you're going to continue this type of work, not just the fly 30s, but these plyometrics to set it up, continue through most of the season. You pretty much go away from them at the very, very end, your competition phase or those most important meets, just because you're not getting enough effect. It's about slow, gradual process with alactic muscle elasticity as well as foot strength. So it doesn't really make sense to do them at the end of the season because you're not going to get enough change for it to really be worth your time. But that's the idea. This is the starting point with your foot strength work, as you can kind of enhance it and put it into place here, starting in general prep and throughout most of your season. So what are some examples of plyometrics? And again, I'll put a video in the description down below of what this looks like, but here's what we use. Short in-place jump circuit example, 4 to 6 exercises done for 30 seconds on with a 15-second rest. Those of you that maybe have done plyometrics with maybe middle distance runners or even sprinters, usually there's more rest, but these type of in-place jumps are really good for distance runners because they get a lot of contacts, but they're not super intense, like doing hurdle jumps or something like that. So you don't need a ton of different things, but you also don't need a ton of rest, and this is sort of a good way of doing this with the distance runner. So just basically in-place hops, side-to-side hops, which basically look like jumping jacks without the arm motion. You could do the arm motion, but you don't need to. Crossover hops, which is basically like jumping jacks up, you're crossing over with as your feet come back together. And then bunny hops, which are basically in-place jumps with forward action to get a little bit more push off. That usually gets us to about the 50-meter mark. And then just a nice cross-field stride, again, kind of putting it into place. What does it feel like to run actually barefoot? I recommend doing these, like I said, on grass without shoes. Obviously, that's what we're talking about here. And that's how you can absolutely do it. You can also do this, what I call a long bounding circuit. As you will notice, because I do these off campus, I normally don't do these barefoot, but you can do it with your bounding circuit too. I recommend doing bounding type circuits. Typically when I'm doing my hill work in Tampa, Florida, we don't have a lot of hills, so I have to travel for my short hill intervals, not too far away, about 20 minutes, but it's certainly not on campus. And for our other type of circuits, a little bit even further away. I mean, not circuits, but our hill intervals, medium and then long. So I typically am not able to do it, but it's not because it wouldn't be beneficial. It's just for my situation, I can't do it in the safe way. If you have a way of doing it, maybe you have a hill very close to campus where you could do this type of stuff without shoes before going into the actual hill work, it would probably be even more effective. So these are 20 to 30 meters with each of these exercises, each with about a 20-meter run out afterwards, just a stride after you do them for 20 to 30 meters, and then walk back recovery. Just walking lunges, most people know what that looks like. Just 10 to 15 meters. If you try and do these for 30 meters, you're going to be very sore, even just in a short period, and then the run out. Really good A skips, so that means you're really coming back down really quickly, but you're trying to get horizontal distance, so basically trying to move across the field. Good A skips for trying to get some vertical height. And then opposite leg bounding. Basically, it almost looks like it's kind of like a skip, but really you're like bounding, really. And I don't have a video of this yet. I will. We're just about to start doing these with us and our training scheme here at Wharton High School. I'm filming this on July 22nd. I typically don't do this until the second round of hills, and I talk about doing hills in 4-week blocks and then coming back to it after 2 weeks off, and we're just about to start our second week block here. So I will get a video of this and post it, and I'll try to remember to link this back to it, but if not, check out that video. And then, like I said, opposite leg bounding, and then end with another good cross-field stride. And as I mentioned, I don't usually do these barefoot because we're off campus, but you absolutely could, and it definitely would enhance that type of work as we were talking about. All right, so you've gone through all of your general prep, and you've done, your alactic work, and potentially, if you wanted to do it, your bounding work, your hill work, and you did these 2 different plyometric type workouts barefoot all the way through general prep, which probably got you about 10 to 11 weeks of this type of work. Now you're getting into specific prep, and you're ready for, you've developed some foot strength along with other just general development aerobically and with specific strength throughout. Now you're ready to start with special endurance 2 type work. And really it starts with work that's more an intensive tempo. Again, I'll put a video in the description down below that talks about special endurance 2. I would definitely recommend checking it out, because we're going to build on that here. And you're ready to build on not just the glycolytic type of improvements you get from special endurance 2 work, but you can also get this added benefit of the foot strength from barefoot running. So, perfectly designed for barefoot run, special endurance 2. It's really that sweet spot of it being long enough to where you get a lot of changes, and it's high enough intensity to where you're getting all these changes that we want in terms of foot strength. So the intensity and extent best help create strength adaptations in the foot muscle for more effective and powerful push-off. Special Endurance 1, those of you that maybe watched that video just know Special Endurance 1, it's definitely shorter and much more intense. And you definitely want to do those in spikes on the track because you're really looking for much more greater power production. Also, there's the idea of if you're going that kind of fast, there is the potential that you might, hurt some of these muscles in the foot. It's not a high chance, but it's just better to do with Special Endurance 2. It just lends itself much more for that powerful push-off because it's a little bit more extended. Special Endurance 2 is longer than Special Endurance 1, and just the intensity is kind of right in that sweet spot to get exactly what we want once you've added some of it from the plyometric drills earlier on in the year. So find an open field where you can set up cones, okay? Check for safety concerns like holes and rocks. Like I said, the reason why I do my plyometrics, part of the reason, well, not only because it just fits perfectly, but we do them when we're on the track, is because, I know that our football field is very uniform. It's kept very uniform as much as possible. There's not going to be holes or rocks or anything like that. So if you are going to do these Special Endurance 2 workouts off your campus, find a good, safe field. Make sure it's safe first. You know, we have a lot of soccer fields by us and a lot of community parks that are not used, especially at the time of day where we would be using them, so it's not like we're taking over a place or anything like that too. Just find a place that's very safe. It's not going to have holes or rocks or mulch, or you don't have to cross over cement or something like that. Something that's very, very safe before you do any of this. And then you're going to want to set up some cones for the course that allow good wide turns. You don't have to be snaking through something or sharp turns, just good round turns, kind of thinking about the way that a track would sort of look if you can kind of manage it. Something like that allows them to use the speed, increased speed that you're trying to get from Special Endurance 2, because you don't want to take away from the Special Endurance 2 just to make it barefoot. Your why for the day for Special Endurance 2 is to work the anaerobic glycolytic system. We just want to enhance it by seeing how we can add some foot strength, some specific strength as we're doing it. So don't lose it by saying, oh, I'm going to do this on grass, but I have to kind of snake through all these weird things or avoid trees or something like that. Try and find a place that you can do this to where you don't have to do that, and make a good course that they can actually develop that glycolytic response that we're looking for. Something that I like to do, I usually do, is I'll get not only the cones for the course, but try and get maybe a different color cone, or just something to mark it that's going to mark where 300 meters, 350 meters, and 400 meters are. I like to do these as 60-second bursts, and you want to kind of get an idea of sort of a consistency, and they get an idea. You could even go a little bit more into it and say 325 and 375 also, but just kind of gives them an idea of about where they're getting to each time, because I don't like doing Special Endurance 2, especially in cross country, particularly in cross country, and giving them a target time. So this is kind of giving them an idea, are they getting close to the same distance in their 60-second rep. Follow the normal Special Endurance 2 workout protocols. Again, I'll put a video in the description down below that talks about it. Starting with tight rests to build out as they're ready for more increased intensity. Special Endurance 2 is typically going to be between 300 meters and 600 meters. Again, I give 60 seconds in cross country, and I'll explain that in more detail in the Special Endurance 2 video. Total volume should be about 1 to 2 miles. Typically what I do is I'll do 5 to 6 60-second bursts. They're going to get at least to a mile in that, hopefully, if they're doing even just 5 of them. And nobody's going to get over 2 miles if we do 6 of those. Even if they're going 400 meters, we're only going to get to 1.5 miles. And I don't think any of my kids are going to, in a barefoot scenario, because it's not going to be as fast as obviously doing it on the track and spikes, are going to get over 400 meters in 60 seconds, especially in the cross-country season. And last part of this, do these starting in specific prep. We talked about the idea of you want to do these about halfway through the year is when specific prep is going to start. You've got 10 or whatever weeks of general prep in this whole video series we've been talking about with cross country. We talked about, I like an 11-week general prep. It just sort of works for our situation. And then you start with specific prep after about 12 weeks. So they've gotten 11 weeks of just overall development, but also hopefully the foot strength as you've done those plyometric drills. So plyometric drills early have built some foot strength. Now that we're in specific prep, this is going to allow you to do that's going to allow you to do these when you get into specific prep. And in your, like I said, that's not what I meant to say. Also, in specific prep, you're not going to do this before specific prep because of the acid development. We talk about that in more detail, but you're not going to want to work acid buffering capacity before specific prep anyway, so there's no point in trying to work that foot strength before. They're not ready for it because they haven't done the plyometrics, and you're not ready for specific prep type workouts before you get to it, and that's for acid buffering capacity. So I talked about the specific strength gains that comes with barefoot running, and that's not even typically what I think people usually think about why they're doing barefoot runs. It's probably usually for this idea, this injury reduction from barefoot runs. So I did want to talk about the specific foot strength first, just because that really does impact performance in cross country, and that's really the idea, and all distance running, honestly. But this is the idea that if you're injured, you're obviously not performing either. So I wanted to leave this for second, but it is a key aspect of why you would be doing these types of barefoot workouts also. So barefoot runs tend to reduce injury rate, or the idea of doing barefoot type workouts, but not maybe for the reason that you're thinking. The strength gains that you get in terms of foot strength from this doesn't really that's not the reason why you don't necessarily have injury rates from this, and it comes from Many studies have looked at barefoot running. The one that I really looked at was a study that basically looked at several different studies and kind of compiled it. Principal author here, released in 2012, and it's titled What We Can Learn About Running from Barefoot Running, an Evolutionary Medical Perspective. Again, it looked at many different studies. If you don't take my word for it, and I wouldn't recommend it, I would actually go and read the study yourself. It's not too long. Where it talked about this, go ahead and you can easily find it by just doing a Google search for this author's name and the year, or if you look at the actual title itself, it should pop up where you can read the whole thing for free, or it might even just be the abstract, but I found the full thing for free by just typing that in. And essentially, what this study of various studies found was that those who run barefoot typically use proper midfoot striking that reduces injury rate and increases economy. Okay, so there's a lot that was in that one sentence. So it's not the fact that the foot is stronger that's reducing injury rate, right? It's the idea that people that run barefoot don't heel strike. Heel striking is bad for a couple of reasons. This study looked at it. The idea is when you heel strike, you hit the ground and then you come and you hit the middle of your foot, basically the ball of your foot, that whole area. You've got two forces that are being shot through your leg, right? You kind of hit the ground, your knee typically tends to be a little bit more straight when you hit with a heel strike, and then you contact again with that second part of your foot. That double surge of energy through your legs is what causes a lot of knee injuries, even lower leg injuries and things like that. That's what causes a lot of the injuries from heel striking. It also, that double strike stops momentum, right? The idea that it's the muscle's just being, not the muscle, the energy is being lost through those 2 points of contact, first the heel and then the middle of the foot. You're losing economy. It takes more energy to get from one place to another with that sort of mechanic, okay? People who tend to run in shoes that have a lot of cushioning, heel strike, typically because their body thinks I'm perfectly protected from injuring myself, so I'm just going to hit the ground heel to toe. It's sort of the way that a human walks. The way a human walks and the way a human is designed to run are not the same thing, but that's what kind of gets ingrained when you wear shoes a lot and if you wear really cushioned running shoes. This is where the idea of minimalist shoes kind of came from and barefoot running to begin with, because if you do not have a ton of heel support, after just a few steps, you're going to realize this is really going to hurt me. I better start hitting with that middle part of my foot, right in the ball of your foot, that kind of thing. That's that idea of a mid-foot strike. That is much more proper running mechanics. And those who, spend time without shoes, do workouts without shoes, maybe wear minimalist shoes, or maybe just naturally, because people naturally mid-foot strike, some people naturally more rear foot strike, and some people also naturally toe strike. Those are the three mechanics that they talked about in this study. But people who then spend time out of their shoes by doing workouts out of, without shoes, they tend to transition from rear foot striking to midfoot striking much more so. So it doesn't mean that you're going to, that you heel strike just because you run in shoes, but some people maybe more naturally do, and this can kind of correct it. It also doesn't mean, you might be a midfoot striker and you've never done any barefoot workouts either, so that is possible also, but this can help correct it and reduce injury rates. So when you hit with the middle of your foot, that double surge, those double contacts don't happen. Your body's more prepared for the contacts, also from things like plyometrics and things like that, so you have less injury rate. And it's also going to increase that economy because you're not just stopping yourself dead with every step with that double, heel strike and then midfoot strike. It's just midfoot strike into the next midfoot strike. Like I said, it's possible to run this way without running barefoot, but the nature of barefoot running tends to cause the runner to avoid this heel striking over time. So that's another good reason, not just the strength gains that come from it, but in terms of the reduction of injury and also the increased economy that comes with it too. So, however, you need to be smart about this, right? Again, not just running, we talked about this at the beginning, not just running barefoot mindlessly. We talked about it for the strength gains, not just doing your warm-ups and your cool-downs in it. Having a good systematic approach, knowing why you're doing it, and I come back to this in a lot of the videos of knowing your why, and that can really help guide you. Injury still can easily occur while barefoot running, right? If you go and you decide to run in a parking lot barefoot, you're probably going to end up with a bruised heel or bruised bottom of your foot in some way. You could step on something. You could easily injure yourself while running in a different way if you're not being smart about it, right? So make sure you find find safe places to do these workout types, right? don't just do them wherever. Find a place where it's safe. Like I said, we use our football infield when we're on the track. I don't do these with bounding circuits because I'm off campus at places that would be unsafe. These places where we do the hills are not safe to do barefoot bounding plyometrics. You, for your situation, may have a great place for that, and then because you know your why, you can easily get it in. I don't have that situation, so I'm not going to do it just to do it because somebody could get injured. It's also, you got to ease into these so the work so the easier work comes first. We already talked about this, but this is the idea of not injuring yourself. The plyometrics early in the year and throughout. Easy anaerobic glycolytic work, that's the idea of doing extensive tempo, which I talk about that, I'll put in the video down below. Extensive tempo becoming intensive tempo work, and then eventually fast special endurance workouts once you are prepared for it. Not just through everything that you're doing in the season, getting more prepared for this more intense work, not just in terms of foot strength, but also because you did plyometrics, then the easy anaerobic glycolytic work and special endurance 2 work, it will be much safer, much more effective when you get to that point. The idea being is you don't do these things out of order. You got to get to a natural point where it makes sense to do it, not just from anything else, but also with these barefoot type runs. All right, so some key points to wrap up this discussion. Not a super extensive discussion here like some of the previous workout video types we've done, but just because something is simple doesn't mean it's unimportant, right? The reason why you do the foot, these barefoot workouts is for the foot strength, which is pretty easy to explain, and the reduction in injury, which is a little bit confusing, but I hopefully I explained it in a proper way. I'll find a link to that study that I mentioned, and I'll put it in the description down below too, so you can also look at it. But that's the idea. Just because something is simple doesn't mean it's unimportant. Foot strength is very important. It's how you're contacting the ground, and there are some important things to take away from it, but maybe it's just a little bit easier to understand than maybe some of these other things, which makes it great because not everything has to be super complex. So the key points are: distance runners need relatively high specific strength, right? They don't have to have, huge shoulders or huge chest muscles or back muscles or things like that. But the areas where they need to be strong have to be very strong because of so many contacts, right? And one of those key aspects is this type of foot strength that we're trying to develop with barefoot runs. There are 2 main ways to safely develop foot strength, and we already talked about the idea of never wearing shoes, which is really not practical for most places of the world. But the second way that you can do it is doing barefoot workouts where and how it makes sense, right? Not just doing them just to do it, right? Not just every other week doing a warm-up without shoes. That's not really going to do it. Being systematic about it. Like all training adaptations, need to do them consistently, right? Don't just do them a couple times a year to feel better about yourself. Just like not doing your warm-ups or your cool-downs just to feel better about yourself. If you're going to do a barefoot workout 2 times a year, don't do them. It's not enough to make it, you're not going to get any adaptations. You're not doing them consistently enough to convince your body that you're doing them to where your body needs to make adaptations of increased force production from these foot muscles. Don't just do them a couple times a year. Make it a part of your normal macro cycle. Don't make it to where you decide that there is a barefoot workout and it's a surprise for either yourself, or you're training yourself, or who you're training. This should be a regular part of your routine, okay? It's part of your normal macro cycle, and I really should even say part of your normal microcycle, because it should be there almost every week in general prep, or at least every other week, because alactic workouts sometimes taken every other week. And then when you get to specific prep, when you go to more of a 9-day microcycle, hopefully in that time you're doing something that's special endurance 2 type, your extensive tempo to intensive tempo to special endurance 2, or you're doing fly 30. So this should be something that's very normal, very natural. You're doing it all the time. So it's not just like a sort of a surprise thing, like a workout you do once or twice a year. Make it consistent. Make it a normal part of your routine, because if it isn't, your body is not going to make these adaptations. You're not going to get what you want out of them anyway, so it just becomes sort of a waste of time. Start safely with barefoot workouts and build out. Plyometric drills can start this in general prep and going throughout, and special endurance 2 workouts should continue this starting in specific prep, right? Don't try and do special endurance 2 work in specific prep for a number of reasons, this being a very small part of it. Special endurance 2 is acid producing, and you don't want to have that acid buffering capacity starting too early. Again, video in the description down below on this that'll talk about that more so. But the idea of there's always a process to almost everything you're doing. Put everything in its proper place, just like these barefoot runs, and you'll be in good shape. So if you like this video, please think about liking or subscribing. I usually do about 3 to 5 videos a week on different aspects of running. I will do a video in the next little bit on basically completing specific prep phase. I talked about, how to do your 9-day microcycles in specific prep a couple days ago. And I'll do a video where we go through that fictitious macrocycle just for specific prep, just to give you an idea of what you could be doing and sort of some of the concerns that come with when you start putting meets into place and trying to get everything in place as you're going through it. I'll also do a video. We're going to start looking at things called long hill intervals, another transition. We talked about medium hills that transition you from general prep to specific prep. Well, long hills transition you from specific prep to pre-comp, which would be the second workout phase, the third part of your macro cycle, because it starts with a transitionary rest period. But the third part, 4 parts if you do the rest and recovery. But the third part that has workouts involved with it, that is your pre-comp phase. So I'll also do a video that talks about that transitionary workout, and a couple other kind of fun videos that I have planned out that I've been videotaping my own team here to kind of talk about things. We just did a short hill interval workout here today that I'll do a workout video recap on. I'll put it on the main channel page, and also I'm going to do a video where I talk about just sort of like a normal week, what it looks like in terms of results, because it's easy for me to put it up on a calendar and say here's what you should be doing, but I'll show you what an actual team of high schoolers that at this point in the season, about halfway through, a little bit more than halfway through, maybe general prep, how are they responding to things like a 90-minute long run, VO2 max intervals, 6,000 meters, hill runs like we did today, and recovery runs, things like that, just to get you an idea of are there any things that you should be looking for, and just like what it actually looks like in practice. So until next time, this has been Coachy TV.